The Black Death, also known as the Black Plague, was a cataclysm that struck Europe in the Middle Ages with a ferocity that still leaves us breathless today. Between 1346 and 1353, this pandemic not only claimed millions of lives but also shook the foundations of society, economy, religion, and the way Europeans understood the world. To grasp the magnitude of this disaster, we must dive into the context of the 14th century, an era where life was already a daily struggle, even without a killer bacterium sweeping across the continent. With an informative tone, almost serious but with a touch of humor to avoid succumbing to the weight of the tragedy, let's explore every corner of this historical episode, from the filthy medieval streets to the consequences that echoed for generations. Picture Europe in the 14th century, a place where comfort was a distant concept. Cities were a chaotic jumble of narrow streets covered in mud, manure, and garbage that no one bothered to clean. Personal hygiene was practically a myth. Regular bathing was seen as an extravagance, and clean water was scarcer than a sunny day in London. Houses, many made of wood and straw, were so tightly packed that a sneeze in one could wake the neighbors. The diet of most people was far from a feast. Stale bread, watery porridge, and, if lucky, a piece of meat that had seen better days. Medicine, if you can call it that, was a mishmash of superstition, astrology, and remedies that would make us raise an eyebrow today. Doctors, with their long robes and eerie beak-shaped masks that looked like props from a horror movie, prescribed everything from bloodletting to carrying live toads as amulets. In this setting, the arrival of the plague was like tossing a barrel of gunpowder onto a bonfire. The Black Death didn't come out of nowhere. Its origins trace back to the steppes of Central Asia, likely the Gobi Desert, where the bacterium Yersinia pestis lived comfortably in fleas infesting marmots and other rodents. These fleas, tiny but with a natural talent for chaos, found black rats to be the perfect mode of transportation. The rats, in turn, hitched rides on the caravans of the Silk Road, traveling alongside merchants carrying spices, silks, and, unknowingly, a deadly plague. By 1346, the plague had already ravaged parts of China and India, though records from those regions are as vague as a medieval weather forecast. What we do know is that the disease reached Europe through the port of Messina in Sicily in late 1347, when a Genoese ship from Caffa on the Black Sea docked with a crew closer to death than to the helm. Caffa, a trading city in Crimea, was the scene of an episode that sounds like it came straight out of a dystopian novel. The Mongols, who were besieging the city, were dropping like flies from the plague and decided their enemies deserved a taste of that misery. According to chronicles, they catapulted infected corpses over the city walls in what could be considered an early attempt at biological warfare. Historians still debate whether this actually spread the disease or was just a tactic to sow panic, but the result was the same. Terrified Genoese merchants fled in their ships, carrying rats, fleas, and the bacterium with them. From Messina, the plague spread like juicy gossip, reaching ports like Marseille, Genoa, and Venice within weeks. Yersinia pestis was a formidable adversary, with 3 forms of attack that could make anyone tremble. The most common was the bubonic plague, which caused high fever, chills, and the infamous buboes, painful swellings the size of an egg in the armpits, groin, or neck, oozing pus and blood. Between 30% and 60% of those infected died within a week, often in excruciating pain. The pneumonic plague, which attacked the lungs, was even deadlier. It spread through the air like a cold with murderous intentions, killing nearly all its victims. The septicemic plague, the rarest but fastest, poisoned the blood and could kill a person in hours. In an era without antibiotics or knowledge of germs, facing this bacterium was like trying to stop a tsunami with an umbrella. The plague spread at a speed that would have impressed any medieval messenger. From the ports, it followed trade routes and pilgrimage paths, reaching cities like Paris, London, and Florence by 1348. In some places, mortality was so high that chroniclers spoke of villages where no one was left to bury the dead. Estimates vary, but it's believed that between 25% and 50% of Europe's population perished, about 50 million people in a continent of barely 100 million. In cities like Florence, the death toll may have reached 60%. To put it in perspective, imagine half your city vanishing in a couple of years. without warning or explanation. The plague didn't discriminate. Rich, poor, peasants, nobles, priests, and kings fell alike, though the poor, crowded in unsanitary conditions, were the most vulnerable. The medieval society's reaction was a mosaic of panic, resignation, and desperate creativity. No one understood what caused the disease, so theories were as varied as they were outlandish. Some blamed the planets, claiming a cosmic alignment had angered the gods. Others pointed fingers at the Jews, leading to pogroms and massacres in cities like Strasbourg and Frankfurt, despite Jews dying at the same rate as Christians. The deeply religious believed it was divine punishment for humanity's sins, from greed to dancing too much in taverns. This gave rise to the Flagellants, groups who roamed the streets whipping themselves, singing hymns, and begging for God's forgiveness. Spoiler: the plague wasn't impressed. Doctors, meanwhile, were a spectacle in themselves. Based on the miasma theory, which attributed diseases to bad air, they recommended burning aromatic herbs or wearing beak-shaped masks filled with spices to purify the air. Some, more daring, lanced buboes with unsterilized knives, often a death sentence. Bloodletting, which involved draining blood to balance the humors, was so common that some patients died of blood loss before the plague could get them. Then there were the home remedies, from eating ground emeralds, if you were rich, to carrying a live toad in your pocket, if you were poor and trusted amphibians. Authorities tried to control the chaos with quarantines, an idea born in this era. In Venice, suspect ships had to wait 40 days before docking, hence the term quarantine. But these measures were like trying to put out a forest fire with a bucket of water, too late and inconsistent. Hey, if you're enjoying this journey to the past, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click that red button and join the community that loves unraveling history with a touch of humor. And if you want to dive deeper into the topic, check out the book linked in the description. The plague didn't just kill people. It transformed society in ways no one could have foreseen. With the population halved, labor became scarce, giving surviving peasants a power they never had before. Feudal lords, desperate for workers, had to offer better wages and conditions, weakening the feudal system and paving the way for a more money-based economy. Women, who also suffered massive losses, found new opportunities in trades like weaving, brewing, and commerce, though not without resistance. The church, a pillar of medieval life, lost credibility when neither prayers nor relics stopped the plague. This planted the seeds for questions that, centuries later, would fuel the Protestant Reformation. Art and literature took on a mournful tone. The Dance of Death, an artistic motif where skeletons led the living to the grave, became popular, reminding everyone that death didn't need an appointment. Boccaccio's Decameron, written in Florence during the plague, captures the spirit of the era. A group of young people takes refuge in the countryside and tells stories to escape the horror. It's like locking ourselves in to watch Netflix while the world crumbles, but with less popcorn and more fatalism. Architecture also changed. The optimistic Gothic cathedrals gave way to more somber designs, as if humanity wanted to remind itself that everything is temporary. The Black Death wasn't a one-time event. It returned in waves for centuries, though none as devastating as the 1346 to 1353 outbreak. Each wave left lessons, like the importance of hygiene and quarantines, but also scars. Cities took decades to recover their populations, and the collective trauma fueled a darker worldview. However, there was a silver lining, if you can call it that. The labor shortage spurred technological innovations, like the use of water and windmills, and fostered a spirit of questioning that set the stage for the Renaissance. To dive deeper into the details, let's backtrack to how the plague reached Europe. The Silk Road wasn't just a trade network, it was a highway for diseases. Caravans carried spices, silks, and, unknowingly, plague-infested rats. Black Sea ports like Caffa were bustling trade hubs where Genoese and Venetian ships loaded goods, and the plague. When ships reached Messina, the sailors were so sick that the Sicilians tried to burn the vessels to stop the spread. But the rats, ever resourceful, leapt ashore and carried the disease into the heart of Sicily. From there, the plague spread like wildfire. Marseille was one of the first mainland cities to fall, followed by Genoa and Venice. From the ports, it followed rivers and roads inland, reaching Paris in 1348. London fell soon after, with the plague entering through the Thames docks. In northern Europe, the cold slowed its spread slightly, but even the Scandinavians weren't spared. In Norway, a ship full of corpses washed ashore in Bergen, bringing the plague to the region. Even remote Iceland felt the impact, though to a lesser extent. The plague was like an overstaying guest, showing up in every corner of the continent. Yersinia pestis was a master of infiltration. Fleas, which could survive up to a year without feeding, jumped from rats to humans, injecting the bacterium into the lymphatic system. Buboes were the result of the bacterium multiplying in lymph nodes, causing swellings that could burst with a stench that would make anyone recoil. The pneumonic plague, on the other hand, didn't need fleas. A sneeze or cough was enough to send the bacterium into the air, infecting everyone nearby. In a medieval city, where people lived cramped and without ventilation, this was like lighting a match in a gunpowder warehouse. The medical response was, at best, ineffective. Doctors believed in the miasma theory, blaming bad air for diseases. Hence the beak-shaped masks filled with herbs to purify the air. Some doctors lanced buboes with dirty knives, often worsening things. Bloodletting was so common that some patients died from blood loss before the plague could kill them. Home remedies were no less bizarre, from drinking urine to carrying a live toad as an amulet. If the plague didn't kill you, the treatment had a good shot at it. Society reeled under the weight of the disaster. Cities turned into makeshift cemeteries. In Florence, according to Boccaccio, bodies piled up in the streets because there weren't enough gravediggers. Churches, normally places of refuge, became depots for corpses. In some places, mass graves were dug so large they looked like trenches. The living reacted in very human ways. Some locked themselves in their homes, others fled to the countryside, and a few threw themselves into debauchery, thinking that if the end was near, they might as well enjoy it. Eat, drink, and love, for tomorrow we die, was the unofficial motto for some. Jews were frequent scapegoats. In Strasbourg, hundreds were burned alive after accusations of poisoning wells. These persecutions were cruel and absurd, as the plague spared no religion. The Flagellants, on the other hand, took fanaticism to another level. They roamed Europe whipping themselves, singing hymns, and begging for divine forgiveness. Though initially welcomed, their processions helped spread the plague, and the church eventually declared them heretics. The economy took a brutal hit. With the population decimated, fields went uncultivated, causing famines in some regions. Prices for basic goods skyrocketed, while wages for surviving workers rose due to labor shortages. Nobles, used to having serfs at their disposal, found themselves negotiating with peasants who now demanded contracts and better conditions. This shift was a first step toward the end of feudalism, though it wasn't immediate or peaceful. In England, for example, the Peasants' Revolt of 1381 had its roots in tensions sparked by the plague. Culture reflected the era's trauma. Literature, like the Decameron, shows a mix of fatalism and dark humor. Artists began painting grim scenes, with skeletons and demons reminding people of their mortality. Architecture took a sober turn, as if humanity wanted to remind itself that everything is fleeting. But not all was darkness. The labor shortage forced survivors to innovate. Guilds, which controlled trades, became more flexible, allowing women and apprentices to take on roles previously reserved for men. Hey, if this story is gripping you, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's the best way to keep exploring history with us. And if you want to learn more, check out the book recommended in the description. Women found an unexpected space in this crisis. With so many men dead, widows and young women took jobs in weaving, brewing, and commerce. Some inherited property, giving them unusual economic power for the time. However, this wasn't a feminist revolution. Society remained deeply patriarchal, and many of these gains were temporary. Still, The plague cracked open social structures, allowing small advances. Religion also took a hit. The church, a cornerstone of medieval life, lost credibility when neither prayers nor relics stopped the plague. Priests died at an alarming rate, and many abandoned their posts out of fear. Replacements were often poorly trained, eroding trust in the institution. Some became more devout, seeking refuge in faith, while others began to doubt, laying the groundwork for future reformist movements. Science, though still in its infancy, took small steps. The plague forced authorities to think in terms of public health. Quarantines were born in this era, and some cities tried to clean their streets and improve water supplies, though with mixed results. Doctors, despite their questionable methods, began recording symptoms and patterns, laying the foundation for a more empirical approach in the future. However, it took centuries before humanity truly understood the plague and how to fight it. The Black Death left an indelible mark on Europe. It not only changed demographics but also how people viewed the world. Death, always present, became a constant companion, reflected in art, literature, and religion. But it also opened doors to changes that, though painful, helped shape the modern world. The next time you complain about a cold, remember, at least you're not dealing with buboes or live toads as a cure. To keep exploring this topic and other fascinating historical episodes, don't forget that the Black Death is just one of many stories we tell. If you want to dive deeper, check out the book we recommend in the description and, of course, join our channel for more content. History doesn't have to be boring, and we're here to prove it.